Okay, so I was gonna try and make a couple videos on some things I did to this car to get the LS in it and just a bunch of other stuff because when I was doing research, 49 to 54 Chevs, it was hard to find anything. So I kind of had to make my own adapters, brackets, whatever. But one thing I struggled with was trying to get the engine back. And I ordered LSX adapter plates to bolt an old school Chevy small block mount to, and I got the engine back to where my handle fit between the passenger side head and the firewall. So that's what, half inch, 3/4 of an inch. So I got that set in place, and then I got the transmission mocked up. And the one thing that I fought was exhaust. I tried stock manifolds and they'd hit the frame on this side, and then they'd hit the frame on this side because these cars, the frame is tapered in the front. It's not as just a straight parallel frame all the way back. So I bought turbo headers forward facing off eBay, and I was gonna have them come out here and then dump the exhaust down and go back out. I know it sounds crazy, but I was getting kind of desperate. That didn't work. So I ordered another set of long tube headers for, I think they're for a G body. Yeah, they were for a G body. And this side, cylinder number 4 would come out and hit the frame. So I cut the tube right here and then cut the whole tube out all the way to the collector. And those turbo headers that I had, I just spent some time with a saw and cut all the bends out until I had what I thought I needed. And you can see cylinder number 7 back here. I didn't have to cut it, it went straight down. So once I cut these out, this header assembly fit in the car. And then I started with cylinder number 7 and then welded it back down to where the pipe was at in the collector assembly and worked my way forward. It was a pain in the butt and it sucked because nothing online gave, any advice on exhaust, what to do for it, where to dump it. So I had to come up with my own design because the steering was in the way. As you can see, you have to pull the steering shaft to pull the header out, which, isn't really that big of a deal, but if you're new to building stuff, it could be difficult. And then I also had to remember while I was welding this that the plug wires on these have a long boot, and I wanted, to service spark plugs and pull wires off and not burn wires. I wanted that to be easy. I could have mounted the coils underneath the car, and I tried that too. It's just there wasn't that much room in this car, so I mounted them on top and made it work. The other thing was oil pan. A truck pan would work. I used a Heights Mustang 2 kit in the front, and it would clear that cross member. But I went with I think it's a GM Performance pan that came with the winch tray to pick up, everything to bolt onto this engine. And it's got probably a 2-inch gap between it and the cross member. So I'm pretty sure a truck pan would clear. The reason I didn't go with a truck pan is the rear sump sits down so far that I actually wanted this car to sit lower. I didn't want to drag a pan because I've done that in the past. So it's an LS6 engine assembly. It's got Summit Pro LS. I think there are 3cc dome pistons in it for a 3898 bore. It's got a SCAT 6125 rod, which is a little shorter, I think, than a big block Chevy rod. And then a Summit 8707 camshaft. I think it's their stage 2. And right now I love the way it sounds when it idles. And the ECM hasn't been tuned yet. It's had the VATs taken out of it and some other things. Injectors are, I can't remember what they were. I think they're out of a tune port. And the harness I just bought the pigtail and wired it into a factory truck harness. And then took all the emissions out of it. So it has truck power steering bracket on it. Truck power steering. a truck alternator, and a truck water pump. One of the other things that I fought was this inlet on, or the outlet on the pump. As you guys know, trucks face forward. So I took a torch to it, heated it up, and I rotated it clockwise about 90 degrees or so that I could get that hose in, and it worked. I don't have any leaks yet. And then the radiator hose on the bottom, I used the metal hose. I know it doesn't look the best, but it's easy to work with and you can bend any angle you want. So, motor mounts. So I bought a Walton, I think they're Walton fab mounts for a 49 to 54 frame. You can kind of see it right there. And you can either bolt them in or weld them. And I bolted them in initially and then welded it. And they do sit a little higher, but it is what it is. LSX adapter plate with an old school clamshell on it so that you can adjust the engine forward and back. And mine is one bolt hole off from being all the way back. And then the radiator, of course, is just a stock aluminum replacement. And you got to cut the top bar out of the core support for a fan to fit. This is a Meridyne fan. I think they're the best fans you can get for CFM and longevity. And they got a nice bearing in them and they're quiet. I think this one flows at static. It's either 3200 or 2800 CFM a bear. And I know it's not in the ideal location because it's blocking airflow, but there was no room between the water pump and the radiator. And I did cut the threads off the water pump for the manual fan just to get a little more clearance. It has a heights kit in the front. It came with drilled and slotted rotors and then painted calipers. It comes with everything. For the money, it's not a bad kit. I even ordered the power rack with it and the sway bar. I want to say it was like, I think 1900, $2,000 for it. And I think the springs for it are a little stiff because it was set up for a small block Chevy. And this motor here in this car, fully dressed, weighed 510, if I remember right. So it's a lot lighter than a small block Chevy. They're iron block, iron head, iron intake if it's all stock. So I ordered some springs from Speedway. They're 325 pounds, so 325 pound rate. So they're good to 12 to 1400 pound front end. And I drove this car today and it seems a little stiff all the way around. So I got all winter to adjust it. Brakes. I wanted to mount the master cylinder and the booster under the car, but with the current exhaust on it, there was just no way. So this plate, which you take out your inspection cover, bolt this plate in, and it has the pedal assembly on the inside. And then I put an 8-inch booster on it, CPP booster, CPP pedal bracket, and CPP master cylinder with proportioning valve for a 4-wheel disc brake. It's not really an eyesore, but it sits up so high. And I like a clean firewall. So I think I did do a breather on this car. I've had a lot of race cars in the past, and I try to incorporate some of that stuff into, a daily driver, because that oil mist that you would be sucking back into your intake can cause detonation. So if you can put it into a breather with a catch can, drain it every oil change, it's better for your engine. So it's got one that comes off the plate underneath the intake. I drilled a 1/2-inch MPT, put a 6AN 90 on it, and then ran it into this. And then the other crankcase vent is off of the valve cover right here. We'll see if it's enough. If I get a seal weeping, then I might have to add another one. And then the catch can for the radiator. And it has a clear tube on the side. Gives you an indication where your coolant level is at. I kind of like it. Let you know if you're low or too high. Gosh, I don't know. It's a 2-inch hole in the firewall for the harness, and the ECM is mounted on that hump right there on the firewall under the dash. and I wired in about 2.5, 3 more feet of wire so that the harness, I could put it wherever I want, because truck harnesses and ECMs were always mounted on the driver's side in the older models. So if you guys have any questions, you can ask me. I know I suck at YouTube videos and I'm using my phone, but I'm trying to help somebody that has any questions. So that's a video of the engine compartment. I guess I could go over steering, Flaming River column. The mount right here on the firewall was meant to be mounted to the floor, so it's got this ball in it that articulates. And when you bolt these two half circle pieces together, it closes this gap and bites down on the column so it won't rotate. If you do an aftermarket column, I think 30 inches would be perfect. I think this one's 2 inches too long because the wheel, it's a tilt column, but the wheel's tilted all the way up. My knees don't hit, but I wish it was more forward. 2 inches. 30 inches would be better. And then the air intake, you guys can see I just made it myself. It's 4-inch aluminum pipe. This one's on a 45, and the one off the throttle body is a 90-degree angle. So that's where it's at, fellas. I drove it this morning. It needs an alignment bad, but it's the first time it's been on the road since 1960, so appreciate you watching. Thanks.